If Pakistan was a country in Europe, it would be the strongest country in Europe.
How would you answer a person when they say, but if you have to, brother, present Islam to people, why can't you give them an olive branch to hold and then you can give them your dawah?
It's a weakness of human beings. And at that point, I needed to take every advantage that I could take.
Yeah.
Because instead of looking at me as a thug, they saw me as an educated person.
People might say, but this is not how dawah is supposed to be done.
To be honest with you, I can take the advice because sometimes I do go too far.
Why is it that we cannot launch a counter-attack in this fifth generation warfare that's happening all over the world, a battle of hearts and minds?
It's a great line of questioning. I love it.
Okay, I see you like to live life dangerously.
I've already felt stronger than 99% of the population. So being stronger than 100 of them won't make much difference.
If you could design a system of education for the Muslim youth, how would you advise someone to go about that process where you want now? What would you recommend as a plan of action?
We need more scientists. We need more inventions coming out of this part of the world. If we have more people who are scientists in Pakistan, that would be more beneficial than having more doctors.
Oh, by the way, they're also learning Taekwondo. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you two come here, fight. Literally in the classroom.
No way.
They were kicking each other's heads, man. It was really...
Why are we copying them in the thing that they are midgets in? And we are not copying them in the thing that they have succeeded in. If one thing you want to copy the West in, copy them in this. They're good at this. Don't copy them in morality. Watching individuals who can do... I'm trying to think of something I'm not good at.
MashaAllah, very humble of you, brother. Go to the planet Krypton and then just kill yourself, I guess.
I wouldn't want to do suicide. I wouldn't want to make that decision like that. That's why you find a lot of people over the age of 60, they don't want to live in England anymore because they don't really get the great treatment. Well, I want to be a Pakistani. As we say, ahlan wa sahlan.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd, fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of MWA. That's Maulvi with an attitude with me, Raja Ziaul Haq. Alhamdulillah, today we have with us a very, very special guest all the way from the UK. Someone who's an academic, someone who's a da'i. He's debated a lot of the heavyweights from the Western world, and I'm very pleased to have with us Brother Muhammad Hijab.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's really a pleasure to have you here and see you in the flesh. I remember doing a podcast with you about a good 4 years ago, I think, where you were sitting in a car all the way in the UK.
Yes.
And we were communicating, but it's good to see you in the flesh and in person. And for those of you who don't know, Brother Muhammad Hijab is a man of great stature, both physically and metaphorically speaking. Alhamdulillah, he stands at 6'7", is it?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, mashallah. And I think that's the first thing that people see about him as soon as he goes to any of our campuses. We've been on tour in Pakistan, alhamdulillah. We covered Karachi, now we're in Lahore at the moment. So if you're wondering what happened to my set of MWA, well, that's because we're sitting in Lahore right now. And so, inshallah, we'll talk about a lot of this, lots to talk about, inshallah, with Brother Muhammad Hijab. Yeah. Bro, let's get straight into it. Sure. Let's get into the meat and bones. The first thing I want to bring up is your talk with Piers Morgan. And I want to especially talk about the context of the conflict in Gaza. Of course, we know the situation has escalated quite a bit now in the last few days with attacks now happening on the Rafah border. What I wanted to get from you was your perspective on how you found the Western media's narrative of the whole issue and whether you think it's fair and whether you think they're doing it because they're genuinely concerned, as Piers Morgan normally says, that I'm doing it, I'm allowing a lot of the Muslim voices to come on my show and talk about these issues, assuming or trying to hint towards the fact that there is no other agenda out there, that it's all fair and balanced news. How has been your assessment of the whole issue?
Well, I think most Muslims I've spoken to have said that it's not very fair. The way that they've reported in the media has been absolutely disgraceful. And they've presented the issue as some kind of a symmetrical clash. Yeah. Where we've seen actually the complete opposite. I mean, if there had been 30,000 Jewish people that had been killed anywhere, they would undoubtedly be calling this a Holocaust. And we should be calling this a Holocaust by missiles, which is what it is. I mean, the term Holocaust by bullets was once used in a historical time period. I think we can use Holocaust by missiles now to describe what's what's going on in Gaza. It's reaching a stage where we've seen obviously the ruling of the ICJ, and frankly, it's people. They have to prove themselves that they're not doing a genocide. I mean, it's quite an embarrassing, humiliating position for the Israelis. But we can see what's happening in terms of the news media. The news media is firmly on the side of Israel, and if you'll say, well, that's not true necessarily. We've seen many people being interrogated from the Israeli side, and some BBC reports which look favorable to the Palestinian side. But the fact that this is being underreported, the fact that we've seen people like Piers Morgan move the conversation the way he has moved the conversation, is a disgrace. It's not like for like. The Muslim community now understand how these people operate, and the masks have almost completely dropped. And so I do think that it shows the importance of independent news media and social media influencers like yourself throughout the English-speaking world, the Arabic-speaking world, the Urdu-speaking world, the Muslim world in general. We need to control our own narrative. This is one of the most important things we can do. We don't need to rely upon or be under the mercy of the media in the United Kingdom or anywhere else in the West.
So I think you've made a fair point. My question would now be, do you think that this is, it's just speculation now, but do you think it's deliberate on their part?
Yes.
Or do you think that they're just naive, they don't understand things? Because I think even if you're blind in one eye, you might be able to see what's going on in Gaza, the videos that are coming in. And you don't have to be on mainstream media. You could see it on social media, even though many of the accounts are being shadow banned. Some videos are being deleted. People are having, claims that this is against community guidelines and all the rest of it. Despite the fact that still some content is still managing to kind of sneak out in all of this. And yet still some of these anchors, actually most of these anchors you find on mainstream media, are still talking about stuff like, but do you condemn Hamas, for example? Or they'll say that this is not a genocide, Israel has a right to defend itself. And these statements are being said again and again and again. And anybody who understands how conditioning works, or how you try to build a certain narrative, or to manufacture consent, so to speak, can see that there is a particular type of narrative. But so do you think it's deliberate? If so, what could be the reason for that? And if it's not deliberate, why do you think they're so naive being journalists?
Quite frankly, I think you answered your own question, but I think you did so in a quite good way, actually. Manufacturing consent. Obviously, it's a reference to Noam Chomsky's book, and a classic, actually, an important read for people that are interested in how the news media works. I spoke to Noam Chomsky myself sometime, and he's very tired and senile now, frankly. But he was a voice of reason in times like this, and situations like this, to be honest with you. And absolutely, they are trying to manufacture consent, because it's all linked with the geopolitical objectives of the West and the overall economic objectives of the West, which is a domination project. And they understand that the Middle East have to be in a certain place, Central Asia has to be in a certain place, certain other parts of the world have to be a certain place, and they have to have effective control. Joe Biden himself, he said, way before he became president of the United States of America, he said that if Israel didn't exist in the Middle East, we would have to invent one in the Middle East, or something to that effect. So why is he saying that? The answer to the question is because it makes strategic sense. They find it hard. I mean, we're in Pakistan now. There's no longer any U.S. bases here. There's no bases in Iran. There's no bases recently in Afghanistan. They're losing control. And so they realize it's a game. It's a geopolitical game. They have no military bases in the whole of Africa except for in Djibouti. And so it's the decline of the West, the geopolitical decline, the economic decline. And I think they're scrambling for control, and they realize Israel is a big part of that puzzle for them. So there is that. And of course, the media has to prop this up. And I think at the higher levels, everyone knows this. Like the big players of the media, they understand how this works. And they want the West to win. They want America to win. And they're doing whatever will make America and the West win. I think Piers Morgan knows full well, for example, or anyone like him. Before him was another person who was very famous called Jeremy Paxman. The range, or even his boss, let's not talk about the employee. Let's talk about the employer.
Yeah.
Rupert Murdoch. I think they all know, okay, this is what needs to be said and done. These are the talking points. This is the best we can do with the situation that we have. And let's go for it. And the way you put it was fantastic. Conditioning, operant conditioning, manufacturing consent. That's exactly what they're doing.
So, with somebody like Piers Morgan, you find that in the Muslim world, he did win some respect earlier on. Exactly. For example, you see him talking about the LGBT issue and that, I am a black lesbian and things like that. Those sound bites became very popular.
And the Qatar issue as well.
Yeah, of course. So you see him as somebody who the Muslims can rally behind. And so people are like, okay, this is a trustworthy voice. He seems rational. He seems very logical. And he seems like a person who's got his heart in the right place.
Yes.
But then out of nowhere, he comes up with something which is quite bizarre for a person of his stature, somebody who's been in journalism, somebody who claims to be the voice of the people and so on. It seems very strange how your parameters would change so drastically over the Palestinian issue, which is so clear cut from, I think, anyone who is looking at it from a human rights perspective, whether it's the Geneva Convention or the Human Rights Watch or whether it's the ICJ or whatever it might be. Even many of the non-Muslims, they're rallying in the US, Canada, Australia, many parts of Europe. And then for a person like Piers Morgan to kind of dismiss all of that and then talk about, but do you condemn Hamas? That is something that raises a lot of question. So my question would be that, do you think that such tactics are, again, is this something you feel, as your personal opinion, something that is being done deliberately? Or do you think that this could be by chance? Yes, the person himself might have, just spur of the moment had this change of heart where he's now siding with that side, but it's not that they were actually attempting to plan something along those lines where you actually present a person out there who claims to be on your side or on the side of truth per se, and then suddenly switches so that perhaps they can get a buy-in from the other side.
I think, there was a few figures. I mean, if there were a few figures in the Western world that had a strong Muslim following. And I don't think they realized how strong their Muslim following was until they effectively lost it.
Okay.
So I'll mention to you that Piers Morgan is one of them. Because look at the views before and after.
Yeah. True.
For example, his interview with Abdul Wahid. I think that was a critical moment, really.
Yeah.
Which was one of the guys who was a doctor and stuff like that in the NHS. And then because of what he said, the man thereafter got fired. There's a gulf of difference gulf of disparity between before and after that particular interview.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially on the same issue, what happened. Look at Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson was on Twitter complaining about the fact that he gets effectively something like 1/10 of the views that he used to get. Now, I'm not attributing all of that to the Muslim audience.
Yeah.
But it cannot be correlative that the two figures that were getting effectively anything between 3 to 10 times more views as they're getting now suddenly dropped all those views the moment the Muslims effectively decided to disown them because of the Palestine issue. They've lost a lot. Conservative voices, they don't realize that, because Piers Morgan, for the most part, is moving to a conservative direction, although he might not be a fully fledged socially conservative person, but he's definitely more than he used to be, because he used to be more socially liberal. And I can remember those times. Socially conservative commentators are realizing really quickly that because Muslims, it's not just the 50 million Muslims in Europe. I'm here in Pakistan. I'm going from university to university with you. I'm seeing that the people are quite strong at the English language.
Yeah.
I would even say that in many parts of Pakistan, people's English language is better than the English language in, say, many parts of Europe. Like, I would probably wager that the spoken English level is better in Pakistan for a lot of people. Of course, not all echelons. There's some people that can't speak in, working class environments and stuff. At least, I don't know, 250 million, at least 30 to 50 million can speak it probably at a fluent level, I would say. This is just some guess that I'm making. But that constitutes another, let's say, amount of people. And when I'm here, people have watched that interview. So he's getting views from Pakistan, he's getting views from the Middle East, he's getting... The Muslim community, one thing that it has on the side is numbers. And when people lose those numbers, they start realizing, what did I do? It's one of the worst decisions to make. Andrew Tate, on the other hand, he has a very strong base, and he's maintained that strong base. And part of the reason I would attribute to the fact that he has a strong Muslim following, especially among males.
Yeah.
If you lost that, he would lose. He would lose. I think effectively the same kind of thing. Maybe about 60 to 70% of his regular viewers and listeners. I think that's what would happen. So I think it's strategically a completely disastrous move for people like Piers Morgan. They don't realize the extent of it, because maybe they looked at a map. Maybe they looked at a map and they said, how many Muslims in England? Oh, there's only 5 million Muslims in England. Oh, how many Muslims in America? It's 2-3 million Muslims, 4 million, whatever it may be. How many Muslims in Europe? 50 million. How many? Whatever. How many English speakers? How many Muslim English speakers are there in the world? Now we're talking about a number which ranges hundreds of millions, and they watch these people.
Yeah.
So what they've done is they don't realize that their views are probably more attractive to Muslims than they are to even Christians, bro. And that's why they were getting that kind of following. And that's my postulation. I think the Palestine issue has really exposed this, the strength of the Muslim community online. It really has exposed that. And so it was a disastrous kind of strategic move for Piers as a person and for Jordan Peterson as a person. No doubt about it. It was like, even if you just look at it from a material perspective, it was disastrous for them as people. Both of them have one thing in common, which is that they have bosses who are Zionists.
Yeah.
Rupert Murdoch and Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
They're hardcore Zionists. So if you're asking me if they didn't have those bosses, would they say the same? Would they throw away all that following? Absolutely don't think so. They didn't do it. I mean, before, when they didn't have those bosses, they did. Why they're taking these stances now? Both Piers Morgan, Jordan Peterson remained completely silent on this issue for all of his career. Now he's deciding to speak. Piers Morgan remained, in fact, he was sympathetic in 2014-15.
Yeah, very true.
Now he's taking a more kind of, do you condemn Hamas kind of approach. He's lost a lot. I think he's lost more than anyone else. Of course, he's gained subscribers, but he gained subscribers at the height of it.
Yeah.
But the public opinion of him as a person has reduced, I think.
So I think one of the things that comes to mind is that when you look at these right-wing conservative people who are talking about different issues or who are in the limelight, like, for example, you mentioned Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro. Or
by the way, Ben Shapiro, his views have gone down massively as well. People find him impossible to watch. Look at his tweets and his numbers, and even his YouTube videos have gone down. It's really surprising.
So I think the real deal breaker for them has been the Palestinian issue, because that's where they've lost a lot of their audience. I think what has happened in the last few years, I would say last maybe 2-3 years, is that you have the Daily Wire and you have the likes of Jordan Peterson there, you have Ben Shapiro, you have Matt Walsh, you have Candace Owens, all of these people. And
Candace Owens has been very good.
Yeah,
she's been pretty good.
So for a while now, the Muslims, the Muslim youth in particular, were looking at these channels or looking at these people as people who are probably more balanced and more nuanced in their approach especially when it comes to conservative values, like following tradition and
Has that been your experience here in Pakistan? Is that what you think?
For the last, I would say, maybe 3-4 years.
Sure.
But recently that has changed. So the experience has been that these people are hearing it from, as we keep hearing this Gora Complex term, right? So when people in Pakistan, for example, or in the Arab world, for example,
they explain it to the English audience.
Yeah, so basically Gora Complex is when us brown people living in Pakistan, India, and what have you, are living in that post-colonial mindset where you're impressed by anything that is done by the white man. So Gora basically means white man. So the white man complex is that you still somehow think that he was your savior. He was your the only bastion of hope that you ever saw. And so you're always looking up to them as if the truth is coming from that side. Although from an Islamic perspective, we know our truth comes from the Quran, the Sunnah, all of these things. But then looking at these people, then you have this kind of this awe or this admiration. Now, having that as the baseline, when you had most of the media, which is heavily left-wing, I would say, the feminist narrative, the LGBT narrative, the what are your pronouns narrative, all of that stuff. And if you were to even slightly criticize it and test it, you would find a lot of backlash. So people like, for example, Andrew Tate, for example, you have Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, all of these people, they it seemed like it's the first time somebody's now challenging these narratives openly, publicly, and criticizing. So naturally, they found a lot of support and sympathy from the Muslim side, who are the English speakers from the Muslim world. They actually thought, okay, finally, we have a Gora now who is talking about our issues for the first time. And so now it's really
I think that's a brilliant analysis.
Yeah. So now they are coming for our rescue. So, hey, look, we have somebody who now represents us for the first time. And so this begs another question, which is that what kind of intellectual decline has the Muslim Ummah been suffering that we have to now resort to people like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and take it with a pinch of salt? But yes, now we say, no, but there are so many positive things that are being said. And so even now, yes, the numbers have dropped and everything, but I think it will still take some time before it really sinks in that, our values are coming from some place entirely different. And so, yes, there might be people out there who talk a lot of, stuff which is basically common between us and the conservatives, or even if it's, for example, left-wing people, we might have some similarity with them as well on certain issues and certain topics. But the thing is that where do we drive our base from, and why is it, the main question is, why is it that in the Muslim world, or maybe it's my impression, in the Muslim world, there's kind of like there was a thirst for, or rather a vacuum created in the intellectual sphere and the intellectual realm that we had to depend on the likes of the people just mentioned.
I think absolutely the Gora Complex is the diagnostic here for the most part. And the Gora Complex is not built upon a complete set of lies. There's a few truths in there which make the Gora Complex seductive to people like that. So let's say, for example, the infrastructure of the West. You can't be honest with yourself and be in Western Europe or, America, United States of America, and then come to a large part of the Muslim world and look at the infrastructure and make a comparison and say, well, our infrastructure is better. Okay. So that gives them a little bit of credence. Okay, so they've got better infrastructure than us. The West is outperforming the Muslim world in certain areas, which, for example, they're outperforming the Muslim world in science. There's undoubtedly, in inventions the last 100 years, they're outperforming them. In technology, they're outperforming them. These are generalizations, but for the most part, there's some truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that, in fact. And so, especially when it comes to science and technology and infrastructure and the post-colonial reality, the Muslim is not going to sit critically and think to themselves, okay, well, let's take a look at this, because for the majority of our history, we've been a superpower. Like, if we consider 100% as a timeline from, 631 or whatever, from 11 AH when the Prophet ﷺ died until 2024, the Muslims have either been the superpower or one of the superpowers for about 90% of its history. So this is a point of decline, and or this is a point of weakness in the historical timeline. This is our weakest moment. And this doesn't indicate that we're upon falsehood, and it doesn't indicate that, that if you've got money, then you've got truth, for example. That kind of reasoning is not going to be had. And there's an ayah in the Quran, رَبَّنَا لَا تَجْعَلْنَا فِتْنَةً لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, which is in chapter 60 of the Quran, Surah Al-Mumtahana. Oh God, this is a dua, do not make us a tribulation for those who have disbelieved. Ibn Kathir mentions in this, his tafsir, he mentions by making us be defeated by them. Because if we're defeated by the disbeliever, they will think it was their disbelief that made them beat us. So now that we're lagging behind on certain key areas, okay, it's tempting for everyone to think it must be due to the fact that they're liberals and they're progressives and whatever. And so, like you said, the causation thing, it's not correlation, it must be causation, which is a fallacy. It's a fully fledged fallacy. It's a logical fallacy. The richer you are, the more right you are.
Yeah.
It's a fallacy. But it's a strong psychological situation. And it's mentioned in the Quran. It's mentioned in the Quran, and I was thinking about this just yesterday, in fact, in Surah Al-Zukhruf. There's a few ayahs that give this Gora Complex a bit of texture and a bit of historical context, and also a bit of psychological understanding. One of them is, وكذلك ما أرسلنا في قرية من نذير إلا قال مترفوها إن وجدنا آباءنا على أمة وإن على آثارهم مقتدون. Okay, this is one ayah, which is that we have not sent a prophet to a town except that the wealthy ones among them said that we have been sent, that we were certainly upon the tradition of our forefathers and we were going to follow them. In the same surah, and this is an ayah I was thinking about recently, very interesting. Allah says in the Quran about Pharaoh, فَاسْتَخَفَّ قَوْمَهُ فَأَطَاعُوهُ. I was thinking, this is a very unusual situation. Because some people use it as Egyptians. They say, look, you guys need an authoritarian leader because you've always been like that. You need someone to humiliate you so that you can be put in place.
Yeah.
But the ayah says, he humiliated his people, so they obeyed him.
Yeah.
So what it is that because if you look at the ayahs before, he said, أَلَيْسَ لِي مُلْكُ مِصْرٍ وَهَذِهِ الْأَنْهَارُ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِي أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ أَمْ أَنَا خَيْرٌ أَمْ هَذَا الَّذِي هُوَ مَهِينٌ وَلَا يَكَادُ يُبِينٌ. That I have the rivers of Egypt running below me. Look at my infrastructure.
Yeah.
Look at the infrastructure I have. Look, I have the greatest civilization here. هذه الأنهار تجري من تحتي. I'm standing and I'm overseeing all of this great infrastructure.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
He goes, who's better, me? Now he's referencing status and education. Or this guy who can't even speak because Moses had a bit of a stammer.
Yeah.
So he said, me who's an articulate, educated at the higher classes, who's better? You tell me. My status or his status? So he referred to status, socioeconomic status and infrastructure. That's how he made his argument. And effectively, the Gora Complex relies upon those two very human, psychological things which since the time of Pharaoh were being used. A reference to worldly success. And Qarun is another example in the Quran, but we can't go into all of these examples. But there are many examples in chapter number 28, Surah Al-Qasas. You can look at that. So, Inna Qarun kana fi min qawmi Musa fabagha alayhim. You can check the ayahs. That he was also a man very rich, and the people looked at him and they wanted to copy him and so on. So what I'm saying is, the root cause is this false idea that, okay, the more money these people have, the better infrastructure, it means they must be on the truth. That's why they're looking to people, and people, they've got great education. This man, he was teaching in Harvard, he's a PhD, he's blah, blah, blah. It's all those things which are psychological, which is why I did the thing I did with Piers Morgan. I said, refer to me as an Oxford grad, because I understand that people are going to, okay, it's a weakness of human beings. And at that point, I needed to take every advantage that I could take. Because instead of looking at me as a thug, they saw me as an educated person.
I think that's a very valid point that you mentioned. And I think one of the criticisms you might get from maybe the liberal side, or maybe those people who don't understand al-wala wal-bara, or maybe ashidda'u lil-kuffar huma bainahum. Sometimes when you do talk with a lot of passion, and I would say with a lot of energy, to people like Ben Shapiro, or for example, somebody like the atheists who debated in South Africa, people might say, but this is not how dawah is supposed to be done. But I think I can relate to and I can understand where you're coming from. But I think I'd hear it from you, because how would you answer a person when they say, but if you have to, brother, present Islam to people, why can't you be just humble and gentle and loving and caring, and give them an olive branch to hold, and then you can give them your dawah?
I would want to know why he's saying that. Look, if he's a person like yourself, who I can see doesn't really have a Gora complex at all, zero, and he's very comfortable in his own flesh, and he says, look, you went a bit too far here. I'll take it very seriously, because I'll say, okay, this guy doesn't have any issues. But if it was a guy that I can see, I can sniff the Gora complex coming out of his pores, then I know why he's saying that, because he wants me to be like him. He wants me to appease the liberals. So I have to make a psychological assessment. If it's a close person who I know is comfortable in their own skin, and they're true Muslims and stuff like that, and they're making that, to be honest with you, I can take the advice, because sometimes I do go too far. But if it's somebody who's reeking of the Gora complex, and he's got an inferiority compounded inferiority complex. And he's coming with that. I know what's motivating him.
Yeah.
He wants a version of Islam which effectively tells the white man everything he wants to hear. I mean, I can't provide that, I'm afraid. You're going to have to go somewhere else. And I can probably wager that the so-called white man, when I say white man here, I'm not talking in the color of the skin.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a Western man. I should just say Western man. A Western liberal, for example, right?
Yeah.
You know, I can tell you they might not like me, many of the Western liberal atheist types. But in a sense, they have to respect me. In a sense. I'm not saying they respect me as a person, but in a sense, they have to respect at least my consequences. My intellectual, my conversational, my physical consequences, or a combination of all three.
Yeah.
But I would rather be in a position like that than be in a position where I'm some kind of like, you know, under the wing of somebody or having to appease somebody, have to defend myself or explain. I mean, I'm exhausted of justifying myself, man.
SubhanAllah.
I'm exhausted of it. Now, I don't mind doing it to Muslims who have doubts and stuff. I have no issues at all. But me having to explain and justify, and this is an exhausting process, all just to explain who I am and why do I have to do anything like this? You know, they let them explain themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, the Muslims are tired now, bro, because we're a big and strong people. Pakistan's a country of 250 million. We were talking about the infrastructure, and I've made this point many times, and you've heard it already. But if Pakistan was a country in Europe, it would be the strongest country in Europe. We talk about how the clean streets and the tall buildings. Sorry to say it, there's no country that has the power of Pakistan in the entirety of Europe. The only thing that can compare in the West, in the whole West, with Pakistan is America. Canada can't compare. They can only compare in obviously geographic size, but apart from that, they're a small nation of 30 million people. So there is no country that is as strong as Pakistan in the entire West except for the United States of America. That's the truth. You can make an argument for Germany, but I've seen it. It's basically an American outpost now. I don't think the people there are willing to fight in the same way that the people in Pakistan are willing to fight. And you can make a case for the United Kingdom, but once again, it's now the people that are in it are liberals, and they don't have the spirit to fight in the same way as maybe they used to 50 or 100 years ago. So Pakistan would be the most dangerous country if it was a country in Europe. No one looks at that and says, well, I want to be a Pakistani.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you really had to trade it, like if we really think about it, right? If someone said, press this button, we remove your military power, you'll have the same power as Norway, or Sweden, or Iceland, but you're going to have clean streets and tall buildings. No one in Pakistan, they'll say, I'll live in the worst pollution, which is the worst here. In Lahore. I'll live in the worst pollution, but I will not remove my power. That's really what it is. Would you ever would you think I'm right about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, because there's a pride that people take from the fact that, okay, we've got a strong country here.
Yeah.
You know, we've got weapons in this country. We've got people. We've got military, which is, yes, okay, you can say whatever you want and criticize the army all you like, but at least it's there. All it takes is one person at the top to change a few things, and everything, the whole military complex becomes the most formidable force in the entire Muslim world.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to say, we have to look at the positives as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of positives of Pakistan and other parts of the world, in the Muslim world.
Yeah, so I can easily relate to when you say that, you don't have to explain yourself to anyone when you're dealing with people who are, really ashidda'u lil kuffar, that type of narrative, and they're really coming up to you as aggressors and trying to belittle or malign or mock or ridicule or scoff or give you the Gora complex, try to come from a higher place of some, the name of this podcast is Maulvi with an Attitude. And so the reason why we called it Maulvi with an Attitude is because we also thought that it was about time that people now own up to Islam. They wear it on their sleeve. And they're proud of the fact that they're Muslim. Not that they're mutakabbir and they're like, trying to be arrogant and all. But no, they have to own it, right? Yeah. And you find a lot of evidence for that from the Prophet ﷺ, because people often don't talk about that. People often think that the Prophet ﷺ always just said, just smile and just be peaceful and loving and caring and just a teddy bear, basically. But the thing is, you have examples of the Prophet ﷺ saying that if you are, for example, going in a narrow path, and there is a disbeliever, maybe a rebellious disbeliever coming from the other side, what do? You just lay down like a doormat and let him walk all over you? No, he said put them to the side.
Yeah, I mean, Nawawi says that as in times of war and all this kind of stuff. Like you said, it could be rebellious and stuff. Absolutely, but it's there. I mean, more explicitly, when they were trying to persecute him in Mecca, he said, لَقَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِالذَّبْحِ I've come to you with slaughter.
Yeah.
He's effectively telling them, I'm going to kill you.
True.
there's going to come a time when I'm going to get you.
Yeah.
I mean, where'd you fit that into the whole?
Yeah.
I mean, they were abusing,
Yeah.
as everyone knows, like in
Yeah.
the Meccan period, they were abusing the Prophet and the companions in a very horrible manner. But his response was not, "Oh, be patient, take the other cheek," and so he looked at them squarely and he said, "لَقَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِالذَّبْحِ." I have come to you with slaughter. I'm going to slaughter you.
Yeah.
Now that is. And he was a man that used to smile all the time, and he was extremely humble and that. But he had that in him.
Yeah.
And if they try and eliminate that from the religion of Islam, I'm sorry to say, there's so many ahadith that we can come and do istidlal with. So how are they going to do? How are
And I
they going to
think
do with
it
them?
also depends about impressions as well. I mean, it's one thing that you say what is right, but it's also important because human beings are psychological. They have many things going on in their mind, so it's very important what kind of perception you give. And there are examples of that as well. Like, for example, when they were coming from Medina to Makkah, the Prophet ﷺ told the companions, when you do tawaf around the Kaaba, you expose your right arm and you run a few times, right?
Exactly.
So why are we doing that? Is this to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are fit and strong? No, it's to show the others who thought that when they went to Medina, they got sick and there was, all these problems taking place, that maybe, they have been abandoned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or something. So give them the impression, no, we're strong. And then you have other examples, like, for example, at the time of war, for example, you have Khalid bin Walid saying to the Roman general that we are people who drink blood. And tonight we'll feast on your blood. I mean, it's not something literal to be taken that, this is making blood permissible for the Muslims. But what he's saying is it's a type of attitude that he's presenting, that don't think of us, because the general scoffed at them and saying, maybe you want some dinar, maybe you want some camels, take them and leave. And so Khalid bin Walid is giving that, and he's done this a number of times, where you find that, at no point do you let people criticize or treat Islam lightly. We're not supposed to be, always expected to bow down and just, as you said, take the other cheek, but rather, if you have a strong case, alhamdulillah, we have Islam. And I think it's about time that the Muslims around the world realize that. Alhamdulillah, we have the truth with us. So why are we becoming apologetic? Why is it always that we have to defend ourselves? Why is it that we cannot launch a counter-attack?
Yes.
Meaning a counter-narrative. In this fifth generation warfare that's happening all over the world, a battle of hearts and minds, if you will, why can it not be that we ask the questions? That what basis do you have? For example, let's come to the issue of, when we talk about this, that if you have this impression of the West that, there's lots of buildings and roads and things like that. But what about, so if that is success, fine, they have success. But what about mental well-being? What about divorce rates? What about the fact that your children don't want to be with you when they're 17? What about, dying in an old age home? What about, being a slave to the state, so to speak, where you are born in one place?
It's a great line of questioning. I love it, because I promise you, a lot of people in the West, if they could press a button and replace the tall buildings and clean streets, which is to their advantage and credit, they do have in most of the West, tall buildings and clean streets. They could press a button and replace the clean buildings and tall buildings and clean streets with all the things that you've just mentioned. I promise you, the majority of them would press it. So they would sacrifice the tall buildings and clean streets, but they'll have all the things that you just mentioned: mental well-being, satisfaction, family satisfaction, this, that, religion. They would all press the button.
And there's a research on that as well that was done, the longest study on feminism called The Paradox of Declining Female Happiness,
I've seen that
where
as well.
they did this for 35 years, from 1970 to 2005. And they found out that, post-feminism, like after second wave feminism, you have, like women who are getting now their rights in the workplace and they're getting all of these things. But getting those things is making them less happy. Meaning that now that they're engaging in all of these things, very metropolitan, very doing all of these things, and it's declining. And one of the reasons that they're mentioning is that women, they want family. They want, children to love and family and care and all of those wonderful things that come with having a family, and rather a large family, I would say, that, you're always taken care of. Like, even if, for example, that you're divorced, still you have your family. If you lose your job, you have your family. If you are old, you have your family. If you're sick, you have your family. If anything happens to you, if, for example, you're threatened by another group, you have your family. So your family is your entire defense mechanism. It's what makes you happy under most circumstances. So
And there's another study that was done in Harvard. It's a very famous study, a longitudinal study as well, actually, and it was based on that, the question of what is it that gives you most life satisfaction.
yeah,
And that particular study said relationships. Actually, it was relationships that it was the single most important variable that gives you life satisfaction. We spoke about something in one of the lectures I'd done with you as well, which is there's a few studies that have come out also about religion and happiness and also life satisfaction. In 2019, obviously, the Pew Research one showing that religious people have more life satisfaction than non-religious people. And recently, also in 2020, the study of Laura Marie, University of Mannheim in Germany, no less, speaking about Germany, which actually was I think labeled something like the effect of oneness belief on life satisfaction. And they had 2 or 3 different parameters that they were looking at, and they concluded that the group which has most life satisfaction, quote unquote, are the Muslims. And that was the only study that I've come across that actually labeled Muslims, and they used the word Muslim to talk about a group of people, and they juxtaposed, and the number 2 was Christians, actually, and then followed by like, I don't know, whatever it is. But the idea was, and the theory or the thesis that they had put forward, and these are non-Muslim theorists, psychologists. I even actually had a conversation with Jordan Peterson about that. And, this was done in 2020 and stuff, and he said there's something to this. But then he also mentioned that, we'd have to look at how it inhibits your creativity or doesn't inhibit it or something. That's something else.
Yeah.
The point is that having oneness beliefs, believing in one God worthy of worship. And he mentioned this actually, I mean, despite of all of his things, he's a psychologist, so I'm only mentioning it for that reason. He mentioned it in the conversation that I had with him. If people had paid attention, one of the things that he said is that, because I had put to him, look, in the Quran it says that أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ, that certainly with the remembrance of God the hearts find rest. And وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. So whoever goes against or swerves away from my remembrance, and I'll give him a depressed life. So I was putting that to him as the Islamic psychological position. And he affirmed that, saying that the reason why that would be the case is because the attention is not multiplicitous. So you're not thinking about many different things at one time, which could cause anxiety. But in fact, the attention is only one. So we have one transcendental unifying principle, which is the foundation of the universe, which is God Almighty. And when someone focuses on that, then they're more likely to have satisfied lives. And as we said, the research does actually show that that is the case. Believing in one God worthy of worship increases your life satisfaction. And then having good relationships, as per the study of Harvard, like you mentioned just now, with your family, with your Lord, because that's a relationship with your mother, with your father. And in fact, the study in Harvard indicated mother and father is particularly important in this regard. Also affirms that the next best thing after oneness beliefs, if you like, is actually to be good to both of your parents. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. That Allah has ordained that you worship none but Him and be good to both of your parents. So everything, Islam gives you the antidote for all the problems that you can have. And no matter how tall the buildings are or how clean the streets are, if you don't have the meaning and purpose of your life in check in that way, you will not be satisfied in life. You will have a depressed life, and it will be a continually and perpetually depressing life.
I think when you mention about the belief in the oneness of God and that being a source of our happiness or tranquility or satisfaction, I think apart from the belief, it's also knowing the attributes of Allah, which even makes it more better. For example, you have yaqeen in this, that Allah is in control of all things, that Allah is indeed the best of planners. So no matter what's happening in my life, I know for a fact that Allah has a better plan for me.
Yes.
Because Allah is As-Sami, Al-Basir, He's Al-Alim, Al-Hakim. Yeah. He makes the best choices, He makes the best decisions because He's the most knowledgeable, the most wise. And that فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ, that after every hardship there is. So you have yaqeen in these things. That, okay, I have a problem, but what is the atheist or the liberal narrative offering you? If you are in a problem, you could be stuck, according to your perspective, you could be stuck here for life. But we know for a fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring ease, and La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wusaha. And we know that, no matter what situation might be, we just have to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to whatever is our capacity. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. So we try to do whatever we can. So I think that, and putting your trust with Allah and sharing your problems with Him. Hasbi Allah, la ilaha illahu, alayhi tawakkaltu wa huwa rabbul arshil azim. I mean, these are very powerful words, and if you understand them and internalize them, no matter what's happening around you, the whole world is exploding and there's an apocalypse or whatever, but you still are fine because there's something happening psychologically which makes you completely calm and relaxed because you truly believe, not just iman but yaqeen in the fact that Allah will take care of me no matter what happens. And even if I die, alhamdulillah, I become a martyr.
Absolutely.
So like Shaykhul Islam Ibn Taymiyyah would say that what can my enemies do to me? They put me here, wherever, it's still a win-win. And the Prophet ﷺ said that how strange is the case of a believer. I mean, if something good befalls him, great. But even if something bad befalls him, he still does sabr and wabashir sabirin. So for us, our mindset is bring it on. I mean, no matter what it is, for us, it's always going to be a win-win. So I think that kind of mindset obviously sets the pace for us to begin with. But then the other question that I have is that a lot of times when they, for example, we were talking about, looking at Western progress and all of these things, they look at the Western progress, but they don't examine what's happening from an ethical standpoint over there. Like, for example, a lot of the things that are very much haram, for example, in Islam, it's happening there, and then that's having further consequences in their societies. For example, for us, it's like whatever, samiyana wa ta'ana, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we do that. But then for them, it's like now we have different models of ethics. You have utilitarianism, then you have the harm principle, and then you have all of these things propping up because you're now basing the whole purpose of life is now based upon hedonism. And so here we have that the worship of Allah, and there you have hedonism as the core purpose. And then now both ethic models, models of ethics are being derived from totally different sources. And so when they come to their own conclusion, as it's happening in the West, you have no matter what you want to do, as long as there is consent, it's good. So you have girlfriend, boyfriend, no problem. You have boyfriend, no problem because it's consent. Somebody wants to drink alcohol, okay. One person is serving, the other is drinking. Consent, that's okay. You want to deal in riba, yes, you sign a contract. It's mutual consent. Go ahead, do that. But then, how far can you take it? That's the question. I mean, when you talk about incest, for example, in one of your talks today, I think you mentioned about John Stuart Mill saying that the only reason why people are not having, say, sex in the streets is because of their sensibilities. So the question could be, why aren't people in the US who are liberals, atheists, eating, for example, dog meat? What's the problem in that? Because once you've decided that meat is okay and we can put it on the table, what's the problem in having dog meat? There's certainly having it in other parts of the world. What about incest? What about pedophilia if that involves consent? What about necrophilia? What about people having relationship with the dead, or for example zoophilia, having relationship with animals? That doesn't even require consent because frankly we don't really ask consent from a horse before we ride it, or a bull before we ask it to till the land. So there's a whole Pandora's box of things that prop up when you go down that route, and it's happening.
There was a book called Screw Consent. I'm not sure if you've ever come across it. It goes through a lot of these kind of issues that you've kind of spoken about is from a liberal paradigm. Obviously, the right is a liberal himself. Well, look, I mean, what I would say to you is absolutely you're right, but there's something more foundational than all of this, which is how do you prove the harm principle?
Yeah.
Why is that the right way to live your life?
Yeah.
Now, John Stuart Mill tried to prove it.
Yeah.
Okay, and he had a book called On Utilitarianism. And in that book, there was this section where he's trying to prove it. And the way he tries to prove it is he says that it's obvious that something is desirable. So it must be good for you. Because if it wasn't good for you, if it wasn't desirable, the principle of desirability wouldn't be established. But then almost everyone that looks at this says this falls into a kind of vicious circular type of argument.
Yeah.
Why is it because it's desirable that it should be desirable? What's the evidence for that? And on a philosophical level, no one has actually been able to provide any evidence for that. And hedonistic principle predates John Stuart Mill. I mean, John Locke speaks about it in his treatises. So the hedonistic principle itself needs justification.
True.
But there's something psychological to be said about the hedonistic principle as well, which is, so on a philosophical level, you can't prove it. And the Quran always asks, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ, bring your evidences if you're truthful. Something which accompanies the problem of the hedonistic principle is that, let's be honest, if we say that you want to, seek pleasure for your, in your life and try and minimize pain, what psychological guarantee do you have that will actually give you pleasure? Like, who gets to decide what's pleasure, what is the right kind of pleasure and what's the wrong kind of pleasure? So you'll say the individual. And this links us to another part of liberalism, which is a robust focus on the individual, individualism, in fact. In fact, many people, one of the ways, I think, Britannica Encyclopedia, it defines liberalism as a whole, is a political system that focuses on the individual. So if you have, for example, an individual who's now trying to figure out what's good for him, what's bad for him, what he feels good was, he's doing trial and error, what gives us the confidence in that human being's judgment to know what's best for himself in all cases? And this is the problem. It's psychologically unassured. And in fact, you have a third layer of problem, which leads to one of the issues to do with utilitarianism, which utilitarianism is a it is an ethical system, which is a subcategory of consequentialism. Okay, so you have consequentialism, and underneath consequentialism, you have utilitarianism is a type of consequentialism. And what is consequentialism? Consequentialism is this idea that something is good if its consequences are good. But then you ask the question, what consequences are seen as good consequences? So then someone may say, for example, if we look at it economically, then we'll say a consequence whereby people have more money or more health is a good consequence. Fine. But who gets to set the parameters and why exactly? Could it be conceivable that in some cases having less money is better? Is having money the primary objective, for example? Because then you go back to the god of, I think it's called Mammoth, or the god of money. So why is it that seeking money is the most important, virtuous thing? Now we're going to a kind of virtue ethics type of analysis. Why is that the best consequence? Oh, because it can afford you this and that and the other. But if you have a lot of money, maybe someone else will have less money. Maybe it will increase the inequalities. Maybe this, maybe that. Maybe it will. Maybe it's not the best thing for you after all. Maybe it will keep you away from your family. Maybe this, that, the other. There's nothing to show that it's the ultimate objective truth. Okay, you could say it's a good thing. I don't have a problem with that. But to say it's objectively good and it's the best thing, why? What's the evidence of that? So we can be Socratic at every part of this. But the point that it boils down to for the Westerner is that they're stuck with a system which basically says, go and have fun, just don't harm anybody else, and make money. And this is effectively your purpose. You find your own purpose. The purpose of life is for you to find your own purpose. Unfortunately, that level of subjectivity has not been successful for the Western people.
True. And there's a research I was reading by an American philosopher. His name is Robert Nozick. So he basically mentioned that he gave the example of the person who's plugged into a vat. Basically, he's got everything plugged in and he's just getting all these signals in his brain that he's having pleasurable experiences. And he was actually kind of critiquing Jeremy Bentham with utilitarianism, that if you were to ask people, like, for example, that if really hedonism is the way to go, if really what people really desire is that they're always stimulated by, these pleasure hormones, and they're always like happy with these things. So we can give them this experience by plugging them into a kind of matrix where they are now getting all these signals and they're just always happy. And
John Gray, I was recently reading a book called The New Leviathan, written by John Gray. And it's a book on liberalism. Recently written, I don't know, it's like last year or something, he wrote it. And that's one of the points that he made. He said that the hyper-liberals, he calls them the hyper-liberals, will lead us to a kind of transhumanism, where it's all about just pumping yourself up with pleasure and removing the pain. He was remarkably self-critical, I have to say. Same argument that you were making.
So Robert Nozick actually argues that if you were to ask people to willingly plug themselves into a vat, because that's what the assumption is, that everybody wants hedonism, everybody wants to have pleasure, then you will have actually surprisingly a majority of people saying, no, we don't want to be plugged in, because there are other things out there that maybe are more meaningful than just hedonism. For example, he said, perhaps some people want control over their lives. They don't want to be plugged into something and just keep getting these signals. They actually want to have control over their lives.
To be complete, let's play devil's advocate, because
Yeah.
to be fair, John Stuart Mill kind of did deal with that interrogation, right? Because I know some liberals listening to this and say, listen, maybe he knows this. But John Stuart Mill and others said, look, when we talk about desire and pleasure, we're not just talking about eating and drinking and copulating and having a good time like that.
Yeah.
He made that he would put into his utilitarian system, right, this idea that, okay, well, pleasure could include the higher virtues, not living like a pig, like, for example, learning and disciplining. So for him, pleasure would be like, if you're going to get an educational system, all of that, it would be under his system.
Yeah.
But going back to the question is that, how do you prove this? How do you prove that this is the objective purpose? How do you prove that this is the best thing to do? How do you know that the human being knows what he should be doing and prioritizing? How do you know what consequences should or should not be looked at? So I would always go back to that line of reasoning, because someone could kind of maybe argue against.
True. So now when we, for example, look at the Western world and we look at how they are, for example, from a statistical standpoint, when we look at, for example, you were mentioning in one of our talks today, the happiness index, for example, that's what a lot of people refer to. That, look, for example, you have Scandinavian countries, you have Japan, for example. People seem to be very happy, and now they're basing that upon something different. So how would you answer a person who would question the fact that, but the happiness index,
Sure.
brother, but the happiness index, what would you say?
Look, the happy index is a measure. Look, it's a measure of an aggregate of different things, economic things, like, for example, the Human Development Index or life expectancy or GDP per capita. So they put these things together and they aggregate them and they say, what's the score? And then they rank countries and cities or whatever it is, but usually countries, of course, by that ranking. But it becomes circular, because the idea we're trying to put forward is that money does not buy happiness. But what they're saying is that money and life quality, if you like, is happiness itself. But that's not how we define happiness.
Yeah.
So it's not, the happy index is an economic indicator. It's not a psychological measure. They didn't go and ask anybody like how's your life and how do you feel. That's more the studies that we've already quoted. The ones in Pew and the ones that I've mentioned already. So the happy index is an economic indicator. It's not a psychological indicator.
Yeah.
The word happy in there could be misleading to somebody who wants to understand where happiness would lie. Also, you have the issues of, like, if you write best cities to live in the world, or it's things like that, ranking of cities, they do this kind of thing. They'll put cities which are, okay, the infrastructure is best, walkability. Who set those measures?
Yeah,
for example,
exactly.
Who gets to choose? Okay, walkability.
Yeah.
Why is that okay? We all want to walk. I can go to a park and walk, and go to the gym and run on a treadmill, whatever. Why is that the most important thing that one thinks about when they think about the best, quote unquote, best city, such that they would label, for example, let's say London, right, an alpha plus city.
Yeah.
That's what they call it, an alpha plus city, and Karachi is a beta city.
Yeah.
So why is this one a beta and this one's an alpha? It's a high value one. This was a low value. No, Yani, you could argue infrastructurally there's things going on, but there's lots of problems from a Muslim perspective. Like we would say, families are not. Where are you most likely to be respected as a mother? Lahore or let's say Karachi or London. Definitely Karachi or London. 100%. And that's why you find a lot of people over the age of 60, they don't want to live in England anymore because they don't really get the great treatment. And they feel like they've been disrespected by everybody. It's a real crisis in the West, in fact. So we need to really question, because we're living in an age of fast food and ratings and stuff. What's the best city? Let's just literally write on Google, best city to live in. And then whoever's writing it, I'll take his opinion on the matter. Or let's question, where would I get the most happiness? Okay, happy index. Oh, okay, these are the countries. Or Scandinavia. We thought Islam gives us happiness, and they don't question how they came to that conclusion. So you got to question this. The methodology of these things are not strictly psychological, and even if they were, there'd be issues of induction, as you were mentioning in your talk. Problems of induction and methodology, and is it generalizable? Is it not generalizable? Who they asked? What's the size of the sample? All kinds of questions we can ask. The bottom line is, we need to reassess what it is to have satisfaction in life, and we can't have these people who clearly have an agenda to set actually tell us what they think is happiness or having money and these kind of things. We have to. That's the whole point of inquiry.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So, guys, we're going to move on to one of our very, very important segments now. And the next segment is, how Maulvi are you? So, Brother Hijab, are you ready
Yes.
for us to pierce into your soul and find out who you really are?
Yeah.
Because, once we're done with this test, we'll know exactly who you are. That's how in-depth it is, and we'll see how much of a Maulvi you are. So, inshallah, let's start with the first question. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Why, may I ask?
It tastes a bit bitter and it has a little bit more character.
Okay.
So it's not giving you everything you want.
Okay, fair enough.
And you got to have something that just challenges you a little bit.
All right.
It's like spice.
Okay, I see you like to live life dangerously. All right, fair enough. Okay, so favorite place you've ever visited?
Mecca.
Subhanallah. Actually, favorite place you've ever visited apart from Mecca or Medina?
Alexandria, Egypt.
Okay, I think
It's
there's a
sentimental
bias.
value.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
Nostalgia,
Yeah,
sentimental value. Okay. Your favorite smell?
There's a particular smell by Killian Angel. It's called Angel Share. Angel Share. It's the best for me. That I can't go back from that after smelling that. I didn't think I liked sweet smells, but that's a bit of a sweet smell. It's brilliant. It's amazing. It's
I think you've
intoxicating.
done very good marketing for them for now. Okay, so
Hopefully they're not on the boycott list.
yeah, I hope so. Okay, so favorite ayah from the Quran?
It's a kursi.
Ayatul Kursi. I could say I know why, but I just want to ask why.
It's outlining the most pertinent, I would argue, attributes of God and relating it to the most important escapades of the human being.
Wow.
Knowledge seeking, what's happening to him before and after his actions and knowledge, and then Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum. Without those attributes, nothing would exist. It's reminding us the foundation of everything. It's the most powerful thing.
Subhanallah.
And there's some very nice things that are done structurally. Like, for example, Noman Ali Khan made a nice video about the structural miracles of it.
Beginning
and
and
stuff.
the end and how it's
Yeah,
all-
it's nice stuff there as well.
Alhamdulillah.
And it sounds beautiful to recite.
So you're doing really well on the Maulvi meter right now. It's really up there. But let's see, we have a few more questions to go. Okay, so if you had a superpower, what would it be? Think carefully about this one.
A few moments later.
I would want to.
2 hours later.
No one's ever asked me that question before.
See, this is why this is the Maulvi meter. We're piercing into your soul, Brother
If I had
Hijab.
a superpower, if I tried to use it and then it was like illegal, I would be in prison.
But then you have the superpower and you're above the law anyway.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to live life like that. It's
Oh,
too
okay.
much. So I'd have to do something that it could be useful, like
Yeah.
in the real world.
Yeah.
And that I wouldn't be in trouble if I used it. And it wouldn't be, I wouldn't want to fly or anything like that because
Okay.
I wouldn't want to go all the way up like that. I just, I don't want to fly.
Okay.
Strength, I've already felt stronger than 99% of the population. So being stronger than 100 of them won't make much difference.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Like if there was some kind of superpower that allowed me just like turn it on, turn it off whenever I want to.
Yeah.
Or my anger, like the emotions that I have. If there was some kind of a power that I could control, because I think if you can control two things, you can control your desires and you can control your fear. I think if you control those things, you'll be successful in life.
But what if that fear is required at that particular point in time?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, but then don't control it too much. Leave a little bit of it just to keep you on edge. But
Okay.
the sexual desire and the anger,
Yeah.
these are two things that if I could have a button to switch it off at certain times, I would love to be able to do that. I think that would be the most useful thing that I could actually use as a superpower. Because if I'm going to burn somebody or something, I'm going to prison. If I'm going to fly, that's it.
I thought maybe you were going to save Gaza, bro.
Huh?
I thought you were going to do something on your own. That Muhammad Hijab single-handedly is going to free Palestine. Now that you think about it,
Well, can I go that far? Can I? It's like, can
of course you can, bro. Come on.
How am I going to destroy a whole country with superpowers?
Use your imagination.
No, the army. Can I destroy army? Can I destroy the United States of America? The United States will gun me down.
Think Superman.
No, I don't think I'd have to train myself on those superpowers. I don't think I'd be able to take on a whole army with a superpower. One Superman versus a 300 million army. Like, we have to be honest about this.
Well, there's no bullet that can kill him. So I mean,
Who?
Superman.
Oh, no bullets that can kill him. Then I live forever. That's adab.
Yeah.
That's a punishment. That's not a superpower.
Well, you can die because of kryptonite. I mean, you could go to the planet Krypton and then just kill yourself, I guess.
I wouldn't want to do suicide. I wouldn't want to make that decision like that.
All right, fine, fair enough.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next question. Okay, if you were an animal, which animal would you have been? And why?
I'd be a lion.
Lion. I think you have that logo as well, right? With the
I didn't make that myself, I'll be honest.
okay, somebody else did that.
Zishan put that up for me. I don't know why he put that. I thought it was a bit cringeworthy, actually.
Okay.
But everyone's now...
It's the MGM logo, maybe.
I don't know. I said, do your thing. I don't mind. But
Okay. So now it's become like a hallmark, I think, for Muhammad Ijaz with
The lion comes
the
out.
lion roar, yeah. Kind of like, the MGM days when the lion
Yeah.
pop out of that little hole.
The lion... Because,
why? Yeah,
because he's superior.
Subhanallah, yeah, true.
I mean, even the Quran recognizes that. Farrat min qaswara. Someone running away from a lion. Why would you want to be a prey when you can be the predator? The lion is... But there's out of lion or tiger, but definitely that.
Yeah. Okay, so favorite cuisine, meaning what type of...
Subcontinent.
Subcontinent, really?
Indian, to be honest. Like Indian curry.
So, like, so you basically like, is it like butter chicken? Is it
No,
curry?
I like it. So I've tried Gujarati curry before.
Okay,
I think the way they pack the flavor
yeah.
in that particular curry is probably the most, from what I've tasted, is probably the most rich that I've tasted.
Okay,
I've tasted like Pakistani, Bengali.
yeah.
They would they'd get the bronze medal, frankly. Pakistan would get the silver medal. I think that part of India would get the gold medal.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're falling down on the Maulvi meter right there. You're doing so well, brother. You're up there on 100. You just lost 50 points straight away. I'm really sorry about that. But anyway, moving on. Okay, last and final question. This is it. This is your make or break question. Let's see how you do in this one. Your favorite Sahabi and why?
Abu Bakr as-Siddiq.
And give us the reason as well now.
Do you know he was the bravest of all of them? People associate courage with Umar ibn Khattab because he was very brave, but he was also extroverted. But if you think about, for example, the war against the Romans,
Yeah.
who wanted to do it? It was Abu Bakr that wanted to do it, and Umar was like, "Don't do this thing.
Yeah.
Are you going to send Osama bin Zayd,
Yeah.
the 18-year-old?"
Yeah.
Yes, he is going to send. He doesn't mind. He had that tawakkul. He had more courage than Umar. That indicates that he had a bit more tawakkul than Umar as well, in my opinion. And I think that's why he's ranked number one. He was always there in the front line. He was the way he was, it was just like, it's so difficult to imagine a human being ever being like that ever again.
And I think Sayyidina Ali also mentioned this, that the most courageous was Sayyidina Abu Bakr, because at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when he was there, he was the one to defend him and, fight with everybody and fight them off and say that, are you going to kill someone who just says, that your Rabb is Allah?
Exactly.
So I think, yeah.
And it was throughout his life, like when he was in a position of weakness, when he was in a position of strength, loyalty, courage, desire, everything. Like he had a beautiful mix. And I think he was the best, frankly. Most virtuous of all of them. He was closest to looking like a prophet. Like his behavior was closest to what you'd read about a prophet.
Yeah. So you have saved yourself there, Brother Hijab, and you have scored 95 on the Maulvi scale.
That's a big Maulvi then.
Alhamdulillah, you are a big Maulvi, mashallah. So Jazakallah khair for participating in that rapid fire round. Okay, so coming back and finally trying to wrap things up here, let's talk a little bit about our education system. And primarily, the reason why I'm asking about that is that, we've talked about the Gora Complex, we've talked about ethical issues, we've talked about a lot of different things, and we've tried to pack them all into one show. But the reason why I'm talking about the education system is because reading, for example, somebody like John Taylor Gatto, who wrote that book, Dumbing Us Down, or, for example, Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Well, is that a good one?
Very good, very good. Highly
Who
recommend
wrote
it.
that one?
Same person.
Oh, really?
John Telegato, yeah. So basically, what he argues in that is that the entire education system is flawed from the core, and the reason why he says that is because we're dealing with a system that is more suited to the prison system than it is for education. And the case he makes is that never in the history has it been that the teacher, for example, is so disconnected from the students, and he gives many reasons for that. But like one of them is that the teacher is disconnected from the student, that you have like examining bodies now. So for example, the teacher is teaching you, and the teacher establishes a relationship with the student, and the teacher knows which student stands where. There's a personal relationship, all of these things. And even if, for example, the student had a bad day and maybe didn't get an A grade or something, the teacher still knows this is an A grade worthy student, because of not just the fact that he is good in a particular subject like math, but he has good ethical moral values, and he doesn't cheat. He doesn't try to cut corners. He's always upright. So there's a lot of things that in the traditional systems of learning you would have an ustad, for example, or you would have a mentor who would be able to judge you and guide you and discipline you and be your kind of spiritual parent, if you will. But now he says we've lost that tradition. And then he also talks about how with the ringing of the bell and trying to get people to follow formal instructions and all of these mechanisms. And when you apply this to, for example, now in the state that we are, we have in Pakistan, for example, we've got now two streams. We have the secular education, and then you have the madrasa system, which is now nobody wants to send their kids, generally speaking, to the madrasa system. Everybody wants to go to the secular system because, again, Gora Complex, we got to teach our kids engineering and math and science so that they can excel in those fields. And there is Islamic studies, obviously, in this curriculum, but that Islamic studies is literally hardly anything, because I remember doing my GCSEs in grade 8th, we had subjects like English, we had Urdu, so we had two languages, then we had mathematics, we had history, geography, we had Islamic studies, a very minor subject, we had arts, and maybe something else. So we had about a total of 8 subjects. When we went to the GCSEs, that science split into 3 categories: chemistry, physics, and mathematics. Chemistry, physics, and biology. And each of those subjects has 2 books each. So now science has expanded into 3. Mathematics, we had 4 books now. English, I think in 2.5 years, we did about 8 books. And so Islamic studies, we still had a very thin book written by a woman by the name of Farkhanda Noor. And although I would think that, when you talk about taking the deen and the dunya with you as you go along, what you could have done is maybe split up Islamic studies into 4 subjects, perhaps tafsir and hadith and seerah and fiqh, perhaps. But the thing is, it still remained an insignificant part of your curriculum. And so what is the net result that's coming out of the education system? The net result that's coming out is now, in the Muslim world, I'm saying, in the Muslim world, the net result is people who are in awe of the West, people who have nothing really to do with deep Islamic understanding of certain things, or even basic concepts, I would say. At the same time, Pak studies, which is taught to us, Pakistan studies basically, it's a kind of history subject, but really they should just change the name from Pakistan studies to Downfall of the Mughal Empire, because that's pretty much what it is. And so when you think about it, what you are really learning in school is that how you became such a loser, and how Islam is not really that important. So at the end of the day, what kind of mindset, and on top of that, you have the media, which is bombarding you with Friends episodes and Beverly Hills 90210 and pushing, Netflix on you and a lot of this other stuff. So you've got 2 mainstream things like this formal education system, and you have the mainstream media or even alternative media like Netflix and so on. And all of them are now being consumed by the youngsters who we are addressing right now, probably in this podcast. So the argument is that this system is flawed in the core. And if you want to reform it, maybe there needs to be a change, because in the system itself, they give you a lot of subjects, but you're a master of none of them. As a matter of fact, once you graduate, maybe you won't even remember half of them. And you don't even know why you learned those subjects in the first place, because there's no context to it. And so there's a lot of confusion that is being peddled because that's how they want to control you. So that's the kind of narrative that they're coming from. So I'd like to hear your take on it, that if you could design, like, say, a system of education for the Muslim youth, especially in Muslim countries, because you're now sitting in Pakistan, how would you advise someone to go about that process, where you want now, and please keep in mind in brackets that we're trying to now raise leaders for the future. We're trying to raise intellectuals, Muslim intellectuals. We're trying to raise people who understand what Islam is, but then also they're not completely divorced from whatever's happening in the world. They're not people who've got their eyes closed. What would you recommend as a plan of action for the youth?
So I've been through a few of those. I'm kind of in the privileged position because I used to teach in secondary schools in England. I've done a lot of tutoring in my life as well. So I've seen what the GCSEs look like, the IGCSEs look like. I've seen what the A-levels look like. I understand the philosophy behind them now, I think, as well. What examination boards look like, and how many examination boards there are. In the United Kingdom, for example, there are 37. I think they've maybe increased, which is regulated by something called Ofqual. So I've kind of got an understanding of these things. And I've also seen in the Arab and Muslim world. And I'll give credit to Al-Azhar, because I've done, I'm doing, nearly finished now, inshallah, the degree with them, and seeing what they've done in terms of their manhaj and how they've done things. And I know that that's how, speaking to my mum, because she also done a degree in Egypt as well, like how they do things in Egypt and in the Arab and Muslim world. So I've had a taste of both. And I have a few remarks, I guess. There is something called Bloom's taxonomy. I'm not sure if you've come across it. But it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy. It's a hierarchy. At the bottom of it is like description or something. At the top of it is critical understanding. And what I think's going on is that, in England, for example, they have the A-levels. In America, they have the SATs. When you get to that level of the SATs / the A-levels, what they want to do is they want to assess your critical understanding. So they'll start asking you questions which start like evaluate such and such, assess such and such. And evaluation in its nature is looking at the advantages and disadvantages of something, the strengths and weaknesses. Analysis in its nature is to be able to take information and interpret it in a manner which can be critical. Like looking at arguments and counter-arguments, making a case, these kinds of things. I think that's good. That is something the West has actually done very well in my opinion. They've incorporated this in a lot of the A-level structures. And it's actually created a great degree of criticality in the minds of a lot of students in the West. Which I think it's been disregarded, actually, by a lot of the Muslim world. And when I say Muslim world, I mean the Arab world. Now, I'm not sure what's going on in the subcontinent. Having said that, I know for a fact that Indians, when they come to almost any Western country, they outperform almost every other ethnic group. So whatever culture exists in the subcontinent, it's definitely a culture of education, right? Especially in India, by the looks of things. But that's putting that to the side. The point is, evaluative questions and criticality have to form the hallmark or the cornerstone of any educational program, especially when the child is over the age of 8 or 9. Now the criticality must start being injected, especially when the young adult now is over the age of 13, 14. It has to be a big part of the workload. If it's not, then they're going to just be memorizing things. That's what a lot of the Muslim world that I've been to in Africa and Asia and the Middle East and North Africa, they rely on. Now, on the flip side, in the West, there's not that much reliance at all on memory. You won't memorize anything, in fact. You can come out of an entire education, but you can be a doctor and merely memorize the names of certain things and some drugs and something like that. But they'll rely on the handbooks. You can rely, as a historian, you can rely on some dates and stuff here and then memorize, but then you'll forget them. So memorization is not the hallmark of Western education, but surely we believe in memorizing the Quran, for example, memorizing poetry, memorizing hadith. memorization of even Urdu Iqbal, for example, of phenomenal works of Iqbal, for example, would be a great thing to memorize, worthy of memorization. So that's a great strength of the Muslim world, which the West does not have. It doesn't have that. And I think that combining those two great strengths, that's not to say that, okay, the West is fully depleted of this and the East is fully depleted of the other as well. But I think those are two things that would form the basis. I do see a merit in doing a kind of education which in the beginning, like for example, the GCSE education, you have like 10 GCSEs and you're doing a full range of topics. I do see the merit in doing that and then specializing. The merit is it gives you a kind of all-roundedness. So for example, when people are referring to geographic realities, that you won't be lost in the woods with the information that's being given if you do geography as a GCSE, for example. Or if you do history as a GCSE, like you have some competence in that subject. I see the merit in that. I see the merit in doing physical education. I see the merit in doing IT. Obviously, for us as Muslims, we believe that the best and most important education is Islamic knowledge. And I think that needs to be expanded in the education programs in the East and in the West. Because if you really think about really like Islamic studies, the subtopics of that will really increase your IQ. Like, let me give you an example. Aristotle stated that, if you really want to become a good persuader, you have to get good at three things. And this is, probably the most influential person in Western history, Aristotle. There's no second to him, in my opinion. And these three things are logic, grammar, and rhetoric. Now, in large swathes of the West now, they don't study grammar anymore. I used to teach English. I taught it for maybe 4 years, 5 years, maybe longer than that. I can't remember exactly the amount of years, but we didn't teach that much grammar. In fact, teaching English as a foreign language, you'll learn more. Let me tell you this. This might be surprising to you, but someone who's learned English as a foreign language is likely to know more English grammar than somebody who's learned English in England.
True.
Because in England, they don't actually go through a proper grammar program. And same thing with America and Canada. They don't really go through it in the way that, for example, Arabs do it with Nahu. Grammar. Now the Arabs have removed that now because they're copying the West, which is a travesty, because it was one of the things that really sharpened their mind and increased their IQ. Learning grammar is a very, very logical sequence thing. It's like learning complex mathematics, and it increases your IQ. Rhetoric is taught, but not in that formal sense. They usually, like for example, English language, they put it in rhetorical devices and stuff like that. They'll teach it like that. But logic isn't taught it was taught in the 1800s and early 1900s in England, but now it's relegated in the West to discrete mathematics and or philosophical undergraduate programs. They wouldn't even teach it below that. So I think that if you're asking me what I would have in my ideal collection of things that I would have, a young person, my son, for example, my daughter, or whoever it may be, actually study, I would put a lot of the social sciences, because I think they're imperative. But before that, I would put math, say English, Arabic, Urdu, whatever language it is, because Urdu is an extremely important language. You have access to about 1.5 billion people, because Hindi, and people don't know, but Hindi and Urdu are effectively the same language, very similar. You could even argue they're dialects of the same language, but they obviously have different characters and stuff like that as well. So whatever language that is, so let's say Arabic, Urdu, whatever your language is, wherever you're watching this. So a language, I'd have definitely mathematics. I'd have definitely science, because we do need to get very good at that now, because we were just talking about how the Muslims are lagging behind in this field. They need to get, and the West is good at this. I was actually quite impressed, I'll be honest with you, bro. I supervised recently, not that recently, but when I used to work in the secondary school, I went in, because I used to be a history teacher as well. I went in to see the students and what they're studying in science. And they do now like double science, triple science, quadruple science in GCSE level. If you look at what students in England are studying in science, you will be impressed. They're very good at that subject. They learn complex scientific things at the age of 14. You'll speak to a 14-year-old and he may be able to tell you in England what is entropy and the second law of thermodynamics, and explain it in a good manner. 15. They're quite good at, but they're very comparatively, they're not as good as at mathematics, for example. As you can see with the competitions they do.
Yeah.
China is always on number one. I think there was this competition. America became number one, and they all had Chinese people in their team.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like what France does with the Africans
Yeah.
in the World Cup. But what I mean is, like, they're not as good in the West at mathematics. I think Pakistan is pretty good at mathematics. It's ranked pretty high. Pakistanis are good at maths. For example, Indians are very good at maths as well. They're quite good at most of these subjects. I mean, it's a culture of pressure education, but it does give results as well. So give credit where credit is due. But what I'm saying is, I would definitely have maths. I would have a language. English has to be part of that package, because if you're in the current world, you want to access this language, right? And another language. I'd have science, and I'd prop up science because it's an important language. I would definitely have at least a few philosophical topics. And the ones I would put in the education program is logic, which we have in the Sapiens Institute, like a beginner's guide of proposition logic L1, potentially L2, which is called predicate logic, and a study of maybe some logical precepts using one of the medieval textbooks. Like we have something called Al-Akhtar As-Sulum al-Munawwaraq, for example, something like that. Have like that kind of mix. I would have political philosophy because it's extremely important, taught from an Islamic perspective.
Subhanallah, yeah.
So like, feminism, liberalism, all that, all the political philosophies. I would have the philosophy of religion taught once again from a confessional perspective, but also being critical. Yeah. I would have the philosophy of science. So these would be the three great philosophy modules that would be there, in addition to the logic one. I would have history modules, looking at the great epochs of Islamic history and the great epochs of world history, with particular focus on Western history because it's important, Chinese history because it's important, and Japanese history, as well as African history. I think these are the 5, sub-Saharan African history. These are the 5 kind of, if you like, civilizations that I'd be focusing on. You could add, if you live in America, North America, the Southern American history, like Latin American history, because that's important as well, actually. There's about, Huntington, he divides world civilization to 7. Russian would be the other one. You'd have to have something of all of those. If you want to have a proper overview, that's history. Geography, I'd have something of geography, at least natural geography. People need to know how to interpret a map and stuff like that. I'll definitely have that in there. And then after that is done, people know how to use a computer. Credit to Al-Azhar, they put these modules. So, for example, when I was going through the first year, second year, they put, like, for example, like history module there. Then they put, like, for example, a geography module, a sociology module. I think sociology is very important as well.
Yeah.
IT module they keep, because they don't want a Maulvi to come out not knowing how to use a computer or not knowing how to interpret a map. So this idea that you need to have an all-rounded knowledge, because it can make you look incompetent. Yeah. If you don't know how to, where the countries are and all that kind of stuff. And economics is a very important subject as well. So these are the kinds of subjects I would have as, like, base subjects. Then I would urge Muslims to specialize in the things that are going to make us successful in the future. Obviously, Islamic studies being one of them. Islamic studies would take its own space in this, obviously, in this thing. So fiqh and aqidah, and that's why I haven't mentioned it, because it will take its own space. And that is like, it will be subdivided into like 3 or 4 different things. Arabic language would be one great thing, and that would be subdivided into balagha, sarf and nahu, but also sha'r, Arabi. And also, if you want to get good at Arabic, the best thing to do is to practice the 4 key skills: speaking, listening, writing, and reading. It's not actually to get into that. If you're a non-native Arabic speaker, forget about all of this nahu and grammar, all that, forget it completely. Don't even do it. Don't even touch it. And instead focus on vocabulary and speak with somebody and learn how to speak. Then after you've gotten to a fluent level, you can decide to do the grammar and the sarf and the morphology and all that kind of thing. And obviously fiqh, choose a madhab, but it would be nice to do a bit of comparative as well, just so you can know. And creed, you'd have to go through a creed of school. And a good way to do that is to go through the books of the Salaf. Actually, to start with Bukhari and this and that, and then go to some of these are Tahawi and this one, that. Why not? That's a very good basis to have. Then you can go and look at all the disagreements that we have had and stuff like that, and As it relates to, in Islamic studies, as it relates to, for example, usul fiqh, it's closely related to logic.
Yeah.
But you'd have to get good at that, because otherwise you're going to make real mistakes as a Maulvi or whatever.
Yeah.
You'd have to do usul fiqh, and this is the basis. If someone does these subjects,
They're a superhero already.
that's a superpower,
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
I would put in the curriculum, bro, and to their credit, UAE have done this. I'd put in the curriculum a fight sport for men and for women.
Yeah.
They've put BJJ in there, I think.
Okay.
A lot of people coming out of the Khalij now, Saudi and UAE, they know how to fight, and they know how to fight quite well. I've seen them in clubs and stuff. Very good. And I think we all need to know how to do that. And swimming lessons and stuff like physical education, riding a horse, if you live in a country where there's shooting a gun, all that stuff I think is very important. Obviously you can, you're good with that kind of thing as well. And so that's a proper education. How I would implement it, there would be memorization, obviously, of the Quran. That would be going on in the background, 1 hour a day, whatever it may be, not to shove it down someone's throat and then they can easy in and easy out. What's the point of that? I'd rather have them memorize 5 juz and understand it and implement it and have a good rounded knowledge than 30 juz and they forgot it. What's the point? Putting so much hours, let them drip feed that. And if they want to go in their own pace, if they want to do more, they can do more themselves rather than you pushing them like that,
Yeah, this just reminded me of something I saw in Karachi once. It was a madrasa I went to, and it was a very good one, by the way, very good one. And what they were doing was they were trying to, inculcate a lot of these things into it. But it was funny because they were giving us like a display of what these students can do. So we went to one of their classrooms, and obviously, this is like carpeted, and they're like, barefoot. They've got their shoes outside, and they're all sitting and they're learning. So one of their teachers, he said, "Okay, you stand up. Give us a speech in Arabic language." And so he just off the top of his head started saying, "Inna alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruh." And he gave the whole speech for like 3 minutes. So he gave a 3-minute speech about ihsan and all of these things. I was like, okay, very good. And then he said, okay, you stand up. You give us a speech in Urdu language. And then he gave a very powerful, and by the way, very powerful, like very powerful. I'm saying spur of the moment, very powerful speech in Urdu. Then he made another one stand up. Okay, you give us a speech in English language. And he started very eloquently and very powerful, very convincing. And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. And then he told me what type of subjects they're learning. And then he's like, oh, by the way, they're also learning Taekwondo. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you two come here, fight. Literally in the classroom.
No way.
They were kicking each other's heads, man. It was really... They were in 5th grade, right? Students from 5th grade. There's no like gloves or nothing. That was really funny. But anyway, I was very happy at the intent behind that, because I think they were, maybe a bit short on resources, but at least the intent was there that... incorporating a lot of these disciplines and then having something physical in terms of, especially with the boys, trying to teach them this, trying to make them into men and, not being apologetic about that. Last question I would ask you is that, a lot of the parents, especially in Pakistan, for example, or even in India, as you mentioned, when it comes to education, the most wanted subjects are engineering and medicine. And the reason why is, again, it comes back to intention. Why do you want your child, your favorite
It's a
child?
status thing, isn't it?
It's status thing, and also there is money attached to it. Because the objective behind education is to make money. Is that I want you to be an engineer.
Sure.
I want you to be a doctor. Because that's what... So what my understanding is that sometimes we just want our kids to be these glorified mechanics, so to speak, right? So you have I've got an engineering degree, so I can say that for myself, that it's you're like glorified mechanic, or even if you're a doctor, you're just fixing things. You're fixing human beings versus you're fixing things. And so what at the end of the day, what happens is the mindset is not big enough to think about what you just mentioned here, that having that global vision for the Muslim Ummah, you're just thinking about yourself, about making money, and there's no harm in being an engineer, there's no harm in being a doctor. Of course, we need these people. But why is it that maybe, I would say, 80% or 90% of the population wants their kids to become that. What happened to humanities subjects? What happened to social sciences? What happened to somebody saying, I willingly want to study psychology. I willingly want to study philosophy. I willingly want to study history, for example. Because these subjects are actually looked down upon. So if you, for example, say that in Pakistan, you say, so my son, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I actually am doing a master's degree in psychology. So that might be looked at, oh, because you didn't get admission in medicine, right? Is that the reason? And 90% of the times you might be right, actually. That, yeah, I wanted to become a doctor, but I didn't get enough grades, so now I'm stuck with psychology. Or I'm stuck with history now. History would be probably right down in the bottom. Yeah, because nobody studies history, bro.
Really?
That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. So the problem is...
See, in the West, it's complete. That's not the case in the West.
Yeah. I mean, I know that because when I was in when I was actually in Australia... I asked one of my friends, he was doing a PhD at that time, and I was like, what's your thesis going to be on? And he says, I'm doing a thesis, a PhD in the migratory pattern of ducks. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, is that even a thing? And he's like, yeah, this is environmental sciences. I'm actually studying the migratory pattern of ducks. And I was like, I was just thinking to myself, this guy in Pakistan, they would laugh at him. What is wrong with you? You're pursuing a career.
But what he would say in Pakistan is, I'm doing environmental sciences. He
would say that, yeah.
Because I'm sure in Pakistan they have specialization in certain subjects, right?
They do, but again, it's like majority of the people would be still going towards the engineering because there's a certain trend out there. So I think what needs to happen is that people need to understand a bigger vision of what they want their kids to be or what they want to pursue, and also I think motivate them from an early age. Like all of these subjects, I don't think you can shove down someone's throat that okay, you're going to learn this and this and this and this. They have to have that passion from within that, I want to study this. And
I think to see what someone's good at as well. Right?
Yeah. And so I think when you give them certain role models, like for example, you give them people that they look up to, and then you tell them, okay, so what did this guy study? Okay, so I want to study that. So the thing is, it comes down to having lack of role models. If your role models are people who are in their fancy cars and driving these things and having a nice house and like, because that's what the media is peddling to you all day long. So then the goal in life becomes, okay, I want to be that guy.
Do doctors make a lot of money here?
Well, yes. I would say, I mean, we would have to ask the doctors who are watching the podcast.
So give me an example, and rupees or whatever, how much does a doctor make a month in Pakistan?
I would say that, first of all, it takes a lot of high merit to become a doctor. So there's a lot of education required, and doctors will sometimes say that, we study for life, we're just always studying. But it's one of those jobs that you'll find it and it'll be secure. So it might not be about making tons of money, but it's like having a very good career path.
So the richest, if it's because remember you said the motivation might be money, right? But then surely, like if that's the case, then you should bring your, get your child into business or something, because enterprise is clearly the best way to make money.
Yeah, but then the thing is, business means risk, and if you want to be
so it's putting a kid in medical school or making them work for that because they might not get there. So.
Yeah. So for us, the mindset is now as such. You might go to a very good business school. You might go to a very good business school, and
no. I mean, forget about business school.
Yeah.
I mean, because you like you said, I mean, business people. I'm saying, if you start 10 businesses, 9 of them might fail, but one of them might work. I mean, for me, let me give you an example. Like in the UK, right? A doctor will start off with £45,000 salary, right? And then they'll climb up if they become a GP or something to maybe 90. Like that's a very good salary for them, right? But someone who owns a restaurant, like who owns a Pakistani restaurant, will get a similar amount if it's a successful restaurant. More than that, way more than that, maybe.
Of course.
So, Yani, look at the differential there in how much the doctor has worked to get to his position and how much this guy has had to do in order to get his restaurant up and running. You get rewarded so much more with business than you do with any kind of employment. That's a fact.
Yeah.
So if someone is looking to make money, it doesn't even make sense to put all this investment into like, for example, a medical engineering degree. But what I would say is this: is that some people will be good at that kind of thing, and we don't want to kind of inhibit these people or discourage these people. If you really have a passion
Yeah, for sure.
for medical, and it's a very for me, it's one of the most respectable things you can do being a doctor. It's probably the most respectable thing to, as an employment to do. If someone has a passion for being a medical doctor and they're good at science, okay, or they're good at medical type subjects, in England it will be the science subjects, right? But then, as we say, ahlan wa sahlan, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
If you really want, if you do it, there's nothing wrong with it in Islam. Why not? But if someone is good at the social sciences and you try and force them into that, it's a bad allocation of resources. It's a wrong move to make. So I would say that one has to really think about what the person's objectives are and what the person's good at.
Yeah.
And the young person has to make decisions on their own.
Yeah. I think here, when we look at from a Pakistani perspective, normally the scope that you have in front of you as you're doing your education is that either you have engineering or you have medicine. Perhaps finance is one thing, accounting, finance, that's another thing. IT is another, but IT you can put in engineering category because it's again...
So it's respectable.
These are the major options you have.
Really?
Yeah. These are
so
the
IT is more respectable than something like history or...
Oh, for sure.
Really?
For sure, bro. For sure.
You see, that's not the case in England. That's all.
Yeah, so because the thing is, here a lot of people will do it and then they will go live in England and become a doctor there and then become an engineer there. So there's like brain drain happening there. So what happens is that some of your brightest kids will end up in one of these four categories, either engineering or medicine or accounting and finance or maybe IT, for example.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So what happens is technically anybody who might be studying history or psychology, most likely than not, would be studying it out of because they couldn't get anywhere else. So it's not that they're doing it because...
What's the system here in Pakistan? Like, what do they have right before university?
You have your A levels or you'll have your... it's called FSC.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of at the same kind of level.
And is it like an A level?
Yeah. Similar.
Oh, okay.
But in the Pakistani system, which is the FSC, it's more to do with memorization, whereas in the A-level part, you have more conceptually understanding, as you said, evaluation and things like that.
Sure.
So we have that part. So when you have kids coming out from that, the scope that you're seeing in front of you is just maybe 4 options, and the other ones out there, if I'm not mistaken, are not really that enticing for a student to actually get into. So this is why I would say that, already we were not studying Islamic sciences or Islamic subjects. And then when you have that as your parameter, when you say that, okay, my objective now is to get a job rather, and you'll find that a lot of people who are actually running businesses or have family businesses, they will, from a very early age, involve their children into the family business. Like, for example, they might be in 8th grade and they're still, for example, sitting at the business, the outlet, the store, the shop, whatever it might be, and they learn on the job. On the other hand, when people go to business school, for example, 80% of them might still do a job afterwards. It's not like you do a BBA or a Bachelor's of Business Administration or a Master's even and still do business after that. Rather, you're using that knowledge to work for somebody else. That's most of the times that's the case, and I hope that we can do a data analysis of that as well. That how many students actually from...
What about being things like scientists? Because if you think about rationally, right?
Yeah.
It takes how many years in this country to be a doctor? 6 years.
Yeah.
In the same time, you could do effectively a degree, a master's, and a PhD, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe it would take 7 years to do that, a little bit longer, but. And if you're really good at science, like if you told me if I'm really good at science, biology and chemistry, what would you rather be? Would you rather be a medical doctor? That's my personal thing. Or would you rather be a scientist, like a PhD in science, who's researching one specific topic? I would prefer the latter. Now that's me, right?
Yeah.
And I think something like that could move and shake Pakistani community and the Muslim world in general in a better way. Because we were saying in the beginning, what do we need? What are we lagging behind on? We need more scientists. We need more inventions coming out of this part of the world. We need more innovation coming out of this part of the world. Look, Pakistan is the best candidate, okay, of all the Muslim countries, effectively all of them, I think, for if there's going to be some great new invention or there's going to be some... it's probably going to be from Pakistan. I personally believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. It's the only country that has nuclear weapons. How did they get those nuclear weapons? It was through scientific enterprise. Now you could say it was through they stole the ideas from this one and that one, but it was science. It was pure science. Now I'm not talking about the good or bad of nuclear weapons. I'm just saying it's a matter of fact that that's what happened. And so if we have more people who are scientists in Pakistan, that would be more, in my opinion, more beneficial than having more doctors. And it would be a higher status symbol. I mean, for me, once again, I consider someone who is a PhD in science, right? He's a real professor as a scientist, and he's innovative and peer-reviewed journals and doing these kind of things as probably a higher rank than, as a status symbol, than a medical doctor. Yeah. Although I would say the medical doctor is doing more, philanthropy, and I would rate their job more. Yeah. But from a status perspective, if it was an academic exercise, this person could teach this person, but this person couldn't really teach this person. He can go to him for if he has a cold or a flu or a joint pain, but he could teach him effectively. He couldn't teach him on the academic levels. So if someone's really, really good at science, in the same time as it would take to be a doctor, you could effectively be a professor in science, and you could do professorial work anywhere else in the Muslim world or anywhere else in the world, and potentially be more of a benefit to yourself and to your community by bringing the next best thing out. If you're an engineer, once again, having an undergraduate is one thing, but going all the way through and specializing in something very specific and then coming out with some invention, bro, for me, if people in Pakistan did that and they started manufacturing things that the rest of the world and competing with the rest of the world, we need to change what is good, like high status stuff here.
Absolutely.
Because what do we need? We don't only need du'at and people to come and do what me and you are doing. Because not everyone has that ability, bro. Let's be honest.
I know, agreed.
So some people are so analytical, so conceptual when it comes to mathematics and when it comes to putting things together. But I'm saying, okay, you want to be an engineer. That's stage one. Why don't you be a professor in engineering? Or why don't you be a professor in that thing you were talking about, which migration of ducks, whatever. Yeah. You need to do more of that, because if you're really, really good at one masala, then you become the world authority in that masala.
Absolutely.
Everyone in the world requires you. It's demand and supply. Why do you think they're doing it? This is the law of comparative advantage. Why do you think someone would do a thesis in ducks and migration? Because no one else is doing it, and he's trying to fill a gap so that he becomes the niche and he becomes the marja. Everyone else has to speak to him about that issue. But effectively, he's a scientist. But his case study, he's learning science through one case study, and it happens to be a case study that no one else has studied. So what needs to happen is that people in the Pakistani community need to stop being a bit superficial about it, and let's be professional about this. If you really want to be high status people in terms of knowledge production, then be professors and be academics in very specific fields, such that you become required and you become a benefit to the world, because you don't know what's going to happen next in the next 100 years in Pakistan. We need innovators here. We need mubtada'in here. Mubtada'in. Obviously, that's going to be the thing that. No, but we need people here who are like, real innovators in terms of these things. And then if it's not da'wah, because we don't need a million da'is.
Absolutely,
we need some people to manufacture certain things. And that's the way to do it. It's the law of comparative advantage. It's law of specification. It's a classic Adam Ricardo economics. Classic. This is what, if anything, if one thing you want to copy the West in, copy them in this. They're good at this. Don't copy them in morality. Carl Jung said, the West are moral, they are technological giants and moral midgets. So why are we copying them in the thing that they are midgets in, and we are not copying them in the thing that they have succeeded in? This mentality, this approach to education is what's made a lot of us fail in certain areas in the Muslim world. There's no shame in saying, okay, they've done these 2-3 things, the law of comparative advantage, specification, this and that. They have a different idea of what is status and what isn't status vis-a-vis the academic enterprise. Maybe we need to adjust on that point. Not on the point of morality and liberalism and LGBT. Why should we do that? They're not good at that stuff. They're destroying themselves with that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're actually done well on this area. So, okay, let's look at the Western model in that area. And I think that is the Western model.
Yes,
specification.
It's very true, because I think what you've mentioned is you've answered basically what a lot of liberals in Pakistan actually argue about a lot, which is that, the West, look, they're taking their clothes off in universities. They're progressing there. And look, they have LGBT marches, and look what they have become. And look, they have people making out in the streets, and look what they have become. So they're kind of equating as if by doing that, they are now reaching these high statuses of success. And I think what you've done is
why the West have got institutions very successful academically in terms of universities is because of this idea of specification. They've understood that. If in Pakistan, all it takes is one country in the Muslim world like Pakistan to understand we need people to specify the duck migration example. If 200 million people done on issues to do with this and that, bro, we've got a superpower of technological innovation on our hands.
Subhanallah. Jazakallah khair, bro. I think we can learn a lot also from the example of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They were all so different, yet they were all slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have people like, for example, you gave the example of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar ibn Khattab, both of them very different in their personalities. We have people like Usman ibn Affan, who's very rich, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, very rich businessman. You have people like Sayyidina Bilal, who is poor, but he's the muazzin of the Prophet ﷺ. You have Salman al-Farsi, you have Suhaib Rumi. I mean, even from Khalid bin Walid, you have people like Sayyidina Abu Hurairah. One of them is a master of hadith, one of them is the master of the battlefield. So there's so much diversity and there's so much. And so all of them are united by the worship of Allah.
Exactly.
So that's what we need to have. We should encourage diversity in these areas.
Beautiful.
But at the end of the day, we all go back to Allah, and that's what we should focus on.
Absolutely. And I just want to stress on the fact that people need to realize their own potential. My gifts are different to your gifts. Maybe in our case, it's actually quite similar, public speaking, all this kind of thing. But person A's gifts is different to person B's gifts. That this person might be really, really good. Like sometimes I observe people, bro, that they can do things I actually feel really proud of it, like I'm impressed with it. Like, watching these people, like for example, mathematicians at work, and how they put the things together, I'm thinking, wow, that is a gift, Or watching individuals who can do, I'm trying to think of something I'm not good at.
MashaAllah, very humble of you, brother. Your humility knows no bounds. Bro, Jazakallah khair for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope we can do more of this, inshallah, in future as well. As a matter of fact, we will when we go to Islamabad. We'll have another podcast.
Inshallah.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you found this talk to be beneficial. Inshallah, we'll see you guys next week, same time, same channel. Until then, do take care of yourselves. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.